Ignacio shuddered, hearing the shouts of the solicitor, and took the plate served up for him, managing to eat beneath a thunderstorm of names. Bum, airhead, stupid, kook. "Where do you get off, never listening to what I tell you? I'll tell everything to your father and he'll beat the sloth out of you with a nice green switch. Or a stick, yeah. You're still going to get it. Don't think you won't, dummy, wacko. What you get out there is the same thing you see here," he continued, turning back to Donna Severina, his wife of some years. "He misfiles all my papers, he mistakes houses, he goes to one clerk instead of another, mixes up lawyers, he's diabolical. And this endless, heavy sleeping. It's the same thing every morning. Waking him up, I have to bust his chops. You just wait. I'll have to wake him up with a broomstick tomorrow." Donna Severina's foot touched his, requesting that he stop. Borges spat out a few more obscenities, then he rested his case before God and men. I don't say he rested his case with children, because our Ignacio wasn't exactly a child. He was 15, going on 16. His head was coarse but handsome, with eyes of a dreamer, a wanderer, a seeker, who wanted success but hadn't achieved a thing. All this stuck on top of a body that was not without grace, albeit poorly dressed. His father was a barber in Newtown and got him in as an agent, a clerk or factotum for the solicitor Borges, with hopes of seeing him in the courts because it seemed to him that prosecutors made lots of money. This took place on Lapa Street in 1870. For some minutes there was nothing else to be heard besides the clink of cutlery and the sound of chewing. Borges stuffed himself with lettuce and beef, interrupting himself only to punctuate this oration with a gulp of wine, and before long he continued in silence. Ignacio went on eating very slowly, never daring to lift his eyes off his plate, nor returning them to where they were in that moment in which the terrifying Borges tore into him. In fact, it would be very risky at the moment. He never laid eyes on Donna Severina's arms without forgetting himself and everything around him. And yet the blame falls on Donna Severina for always exposing them. She wore short sleeves on all her house dresses, half a hand below the shoulder. From there down she kept her arms showing. To tell the truth, they were beautiful and plump, in perfect harmony with the woman who was thick rather than thin. And they lost neither their color nor softness by exposure to the air. And yet, to be fair, her showing them off wasn't an affectation, but rather because she'd worn all her dresses with long sleeves out. Standing, she was a sight to behold. Walking, she had an amusing wiggle about her. He saw her, however, almost exclusively at the table, where, arms aside, he could hardly even get a glimpse of her bust. One couldn't say she was beautiful, nor was she ugly. Not one adornment. She did very little with her hairstyle. She smoothed it, gathered it, tied it in a knot, and fixed it on top of her head with the tortoise-shell comb that her mother left her. Around her neck was tied a dark handkerchief, and nothing at all for her ears. All of this on a robust bloom of 27 years of age. Dinner came to an end. Borges, coming now to coffee, took 4 cigars from his pocket, compared them, gave them each a pinch, chose one, and put the rest back. Cigar lit, he propped his elbows on the table and spoke to Donna Severina about 30,000 things, which didn't interest our Ignacio in the least. Yet as he spoke, he didn't tear into the boy, who could then daydream freely. Ignacio made his coffee last as long as he could. Between sips, he smoothed over the tablecloth, tore from his fingers little pieces of imaginary skin, or passed his eyes over the dining-room paintings, which were 2 in number, one St. Paul and one St. John, copies brought back from celebrations and framed at home. Now, he might mask himself from St. John, whose young head delights the imagination of any Catholic, but the austerity of St. Paul was just too intense to hide himself from. The sole defense of the young Ignacio was that he really saw neither one nor the other. He had cast his eyes over that direction for nothing. He saw only the arms of Donna Severina, either because maybe he stole a glance at them, or maybe he just walked around with them imprinted in his memory. "Man, are you not done yet?" The solicitor suddenly barked at him. There was no getting out of it. Ignacio drank the last drop, already cold, and retired as usual to his room at the back of the house. Entering, he made an angry and desperate gesture, then went over to lean against one of the 2 windows that overlooked the sea. After 5 minutes, the view of the nearby waters and the mountains far away restored him to the confused, vague, disturbed feeling that both hurt and soothed him. Something a plant must feel at the germination of its first flower. He had the urge to run away, but also to stay. He lived there for 5 weeks, and life was always the same, leaving in the morning with Borges, going to hearings and notaries, running with papers to receive a seal, to distributors, to clerks, to bailiffs. He returned in the afternoon, had something to eat, gathered himself together in his room until supper time. He dined and went to sleep. Borges offered him no intimacy of family, which consisted only of Donna Severina, who Ignacio saw no more than 3 times a day during meals. 5 weeks of solitude, of work without enjoyment, far from his mother's and his sisters. 5 weeks of silence, because he only spoke now and again in the street. At home, never. "Just wait," he thought one day. "I'll run away and never come back." He didn't go. He felt chained and held there by the arms of Donna Severina. Never had he seen another pair so beautiful and buxom. His upbringing didn't permit him to stare openly at them, at first anyway. Seems he initially turned away his eyes ashamed. He peeked at them, little by little, seeing that there really were no other sleeves, and so he went on, discovering, ogling, and loving them. At the end of 3 weeks, they were, in terms of morale, his sanctuaries of repose. He endured all the outside hassle, all the melancholy of solitude and silence, all the rudeness of his patron, for the sole reward of seeing, 3 times a day, the celebrated pair of arms. On that day, just as night was falling, and Ignacio stretched out in his hammock, he had no other bed there, Donna Severina, in the front room of the house, recalled the episode from dinner and for the first time suspected something. At first she rejected the idea. A child? But there are ideas that are like a family of tenacious flies. The more we shoo them away, the more they come back to land. Child? He was 15. And she noted that between the boy's nose and mouth there was peach fuzz. Is it any wonder he'd be falling in love? And was she not a beautiful woman? The second notion wasn't rejected before it was massaged a little bit and coddled, and so she called to mind his habits, his forgetfulness, his distractions, one more incident and then another. All of these were symptoms, and she concluded, yes, it was true. "What's the matter with you?" the solicitor said to her, stretched out on the settee after a pause of several minutes. "There's nothing wrong with me." "Nothing? Seems like here at home you do everything sleeping. Give it up, because I know a really good cure for knocking the Z's out of narcoleptics." And so it went in the same angry tone, firing threats but really unable to carry them out because he was more boorish than malicious. Donna Severina interjected. No, she wasn't sleeping. She was thinking of her godson's mother, Fortunata. They haven't visited since Christmas. Why not go there one of these nights? Borges countered that he was tired. He worked like a slave. He didn't go for visits of chit-chat. Didn't get along with the mother. Didn't get along with the father. Didn't get along with the godson, who didn't even go to school at 10 years old. He, Borges, at 10 years old, already knew how to read, write, and do arithmetic. Well, not very well, okay, but he knew. 10 years old. Oh, I'm sure he'll come to a fine end. He'll go broke and wind up in a barracks. Hard knocks will come along one day and teach him something. Donna Severina placated him with excuses. The poverty of the mother, the ill fortune of the father, and she caressed him in fear that he might get irritated again. The night fell into darkness, and she heard the flicker of the gas street lamp just lit, and saw the shimmer of light in the windows of the house across the way. Borges, tired from the day, for he really was the perfect model of a hard worker, closed his eyes and fell asleep, and left her to the dark, alone in the room with herself and the discovery she just made. Everything seemed to say to her that it was true, but this truth, the first impression of astonishment now unwrapped, brought her a moral complication that she knew only by its effects, finding no way to discern what it actually was. She couldn't make herself understand, nor find a balance even, so much so she considered telling the solicitor everything, and he'd send the little brat packing. But what exactly was everything? Here she stopped. Really, there was nothing more than supposition, coincidences, and possibly a delusion. No, this was no delusion. And soon she recalled all the vague indications, the attitude of the boy, the shyness, the distraction, rejecting the idea that she was mistaken. After a while, so insidious nature, she reflected that it would be terrible to accuse him without cause, admitting that perhaps she did delude herself, finally coming to a decision to observe him better and verify, conclusively, the reality of the situation. Already that night Donna Severina had covertly surveilled the gestures of Ignacio. She found nothing, because tea-time was short and the boy never took his eyes off his teacup. The next day she could observe more effectively, in optimum ways. She perceived that, yes, he was timid and in love, adolescent love and virginal, held back by social divisions and by a feeling of inferiority that prevented him from recognizing for himself the very thing it was. Donna Severina could see she had nothing to fear from him in being disrespected, and it was best not to say anything to the solicitor. It would save him a heartburn and a heartbreak for the poor kid. She was quite convinced that he was still a child, and sat down to treat him just as dryly as she had up till now, even more so, and she did. Ignacio began to sense that she diverted her eyes, or spoke rudely, almost as bad as Borges himself did. At other times, it's true, her tone of voice came out soft and almost sweet, very sweet, just as much as her glances were elusive. They came to fall mistakenly on other parts, and in order to find a place to rest, came to settle on his head. And all that happened very quickly. "I'm leaving," he repeated in the street, like in the early days. He arrived home and didn't leave. The arms of Donna Severina enclosed him within a parenthesis in the middle of this long and fastidious period of the life he led, and this subordinate clause expressed an original and profound idea, invented by heaven, uniquely for him. He left it alone and went on as he had. Finally, however, he did have to leave, and forevermore. Here now is the how and the why of it. Donna Severina treated him for a few days with kindness. The rudeness in her voice seemed to stop, and there was more than gentleness. There was attentiveness and tenderness. One day she recommended to him not to go out into the open air, another time not to drink cold water after hot coffee. Advice, reminders, the cares of a friend and mother, which cast even greater unrest and confusion into his soul. Ignacio became confident enough that he laughed one day at the table, something he never did. But the solicitor didn't go off on him this time, because it was he who was recounting a funny case, and no one punishes someone who applauds you. It was then that Donna Severina saw the mouth of the boy, graceful when silent, was no less graceful when he laughed. Ignacio's agitation was increasing without his being able to calm down or understand himself. He wasn't well at all. He woke up at night thinking of Donna Severina. In the street he confused corners, walked past doors, even more than before, and he never saw another woman, at a distance or close up, who didn't bring her to mind. Entering the corridor of the house, returning from work, he always felt some excitement, at times extreme, when he met her at the top of the stairs, looking out through the wooden bars of the gate as if she had come to see who it was. One Sunday, never would he forget this Sunday, he was alone in his room at the window, facing the sea, which spoke to him in the same new and obscure language of Donna Severina. He enjoyed watching the seagulls, which made enormous circles in the air, or hovered over the water, or just flew alone. The day was gorgeous. It wasn't just a Christian Sunday, it was an immense universal Sunday. Ignacio spent all his Sundays there in his room or at the window, or rereading one of the 3 booklets he brought with him, Tales of Other Times, bought for a penny beneath the walkway at Paso Plaza. It was 2 p.m. He was tired, slept poorly the night before after having walked a lot in the evening. Stretched out in his hammock, he picked up one of the booklets, The Princess Magalona, and started to read. He could never understand why it was that all the heroines of these old stories had the same face and figure as Donna Severina. But they sure did. At the end of a half an hour, he let the booklet fall to the floor and fastened his eyes to the wall, where 5 minutes later he saw emerge from it the woman of his affections. It would be natural if he were amazed by this, but he wasn't. Although his eyelids were closed, he watched her completely free herself, stop, smile, and walk toward the hammock. It was she, herself, and those were her arms in the flesh. It's certain, however, that Donna Severina couldn't so much as emerge from the wall as if there were a door or a split, for she was up in the front room listening to the solicitor's steps descending the stairs. She heard him descend. She went to the window, watching him leave, and only collected herself when he was lost to the distance along the path of Mangueira Street. She went back in and sat on the settee. She seemed unnatural, restless, almost insane. Getting up, she went to get a vase that was on the sideboard and then left it in the same place. Then she walked to the door, stopped herself, and then went back, seemingly for no reason. She sat again 5 or 10 minutes. Suddenly she remembered that Ignacio ate very little at lunchtime and had a depressed air about him, and she became alarmed that he could be sick. It could be even pretty bad. She left the room, went down the hallway, somewhat torn, and approached the youngster's room, the door of which she found wide open. Donna Severina stopped, peeked in, found him in his hammock, sleeping with his arm hanging out, and the book dropped onto the floor. She tipped her head a little bit sideways at the door, allowing her to see his closed eyes, his riot of hair, and a big blissful smile. Donna Severina felt her heart beating vehemently, and she drew back. She had dreamt of him last night. Maybe he was dreaming about her. Ever since daybreak, the figure of the young man went around in front of her eyes like a temptation from the devil. She backed up even more, then returned to where she was and watched for 2, 3, 5 minutes or more. It seemed to her that sleep gave the adolescence of Ignacio an expression more accentuated, almost feminine, almost infantile. A child, she said to herself, in that wordless language that we all carry within us. And this idea shut down the rampage of red inside her veins and dissipated in part the turmoil of her senses. A child. And she perused him slowly, filling herself with the sight of him, the tilt of his head, the hanging arm. But at the same time she considered him as a child. She found him handsome, much more handsome than when he was awake. And one of these ideas corrected or corrupted the other. Suddenly she was startled, panicked. She heard a footstep in the ironing room. She went to look. It was a cat who tipped a bowl over. Returning slowly, she peeked at him. She saw he was in a deep sleep. The kid sure was a sound sleeper. The noise that had shaken her so deeply hadn't even caused a shift in his position, and she continued to watch him sleep. To sleep, perchance to dream. Had we only the power to see each other's dreams, Donna Severina would have seen herself in the imagination of the youngster, would have seen herself in front of the hammock, standing still and joyful, then leaning over, taking his hands, holding them to her breast, crossing her arms there, the famous arms. Ignacio, their lover, remained like this, listening to the words she spoke, beautiful, warm, most of all new, or belonging to some language he didn't know but was willing to understand. 2, 3, and 4 times the figure faded, only to return before long, coming from the sea or somewhere else, in the midst of seagulls, or gliding down the hallway with all the lusty grace that she was capable of. And turning, leaning over, she took his hands another time, crossing her arms over her breast, until, leaning over still more, much more, rounded her lips and left him a kiss on the mouth. Here the dream coincided with reality, and the same mouths united in the imagination and outside of it. The difference is that the vision didn't recede, while the real person, as quickly as she completed the gesture, fled to the door, upset and afraid. From there she walked to the front room, stunned by what she did, looking at nothing whatsoever. She listened carefully, went back to the end of the hallway to see if she could hear some noise that would tell her that he woke up, and only after a long time did her fear pass. In truth, the kid was a sound sleeper. Nothing could open his eyes, neither his repetitive failures nor actual kisses. And yet, if her fear was passing, her shame remained, and it grew. Donna Severina couldn't believe that she would do that. It seemed to her that her desires were wrapped up in the idea that he was an adoring child who was there with neither shame nor blame, and half mother, half friend, she leaned over and kissed him. Well, be that as it may, she was mixed up, irritated, disgusted. She was mad at herself, and she was mad at him. The fear that he could be pretending he slept took aim at her soul and gave her gooseflesh. But the truth is, he slept even longer and woke up only to have dinner. He sat down at the table with a clear heart. If he were even to find Donna Severina silent and severe, and the solicitor as rude as he was on other days, neither the boorishness of one nor the severity of the other could dispel the vision of grace he still carried inside, or deaden his sensation of that kiss. He didn't notice that Donna Severina wore a shawl that covered her arms. He noticed later, on Monday, and on Tuesday as well, and all the way through to Saturday, which was the day in which Borges sent word to the boy's father that he couldn't continue there in his employ. And he didn't get angry because he treated the boy relatively well, and said to himself at the send-off, "When you need something from me, look me up." "Yes, sir. And the Signora, Donna Severina?" "Oh, she's there in the room with a bad headache. And come back tomorrow or the next day and say goodbye to her." Ignacio left, not understanding anything. He didn't understand the dismissal, nor the complete change of Donna Severina in relation to him, nor the shawl, nor anything. But it had all been so good. She talked to him with such friendship. How come, all of a sudden, he couldn't help but think he was terminated, assuming it was something he did, some indiscreet look, some distraction that offended her. It couldn't be anything else. From that came the frowning, and the shawl that covered her arms so beautiful. It doesn't matter. He took away with him the graceful sensation of the dream. And across the years, throughout his other loves, truer and longer lasting, he never found one sensation equal to the one of that Sunday on Lapa Street, when he was 15 years old. He even exclaims at times, unaware of his misapprehensions, "Oh, it was a dream. Just a dream." A Pair of Arms by Machado de Assis. First published in 1885, translated from Portuguese for audio performance by Todd Conner, copyright 2020, with music from Sonhando by Chiquinho Gonzaga, first published in 1881. If you like this work and would like to support The Karaoke, please consider making a purchase at the Karaoke Podcast Store. A direct link is available on the website at www.thekaraoke.com. Or if you'd like to make a donation, click on the website's link for PayPal. Commercial or private sponsorship of future episodes can include the recording of a story live at your own location. See the website for details. In the meantime, as always, listen, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.